Hi, I'm so excited to chat with Jess, another Jess, which is always fun. Jess and I were connected by a shared colleague, Connie, who helped build Helia for our first year. And she was like, Jess is just so good at meetings. And I was like, I don't like meetings. Okay. And she was like, no, she's so good at meetings. And getting to talk to you was just such a joy because I think I'm pretty good at meetings. When I talked to you, I was like, oh, there are all these ways that I could like really up my game. And they were so, I don't know, they just made sense. And it's been so fun to like watch you kind of go deeper and all that with all the wisdom you've had. So yeah, tell us all the things. Like, how did we get to this moment and how and why are you so good at meetings? Like, tell us all the things. Why do you love them?
Why do I love them? I think part of it starts like early in my career. I can remember just really looking forward to meetings when I was in some of my first jobs because that's when I actually got to like be with other people and learn about how my work fit in to the big important stuff that people were doing in other parts of the world, but I was kind of behind my desk doing kind of tedious tasks in the office. And so part of it was just I always kind of looked forward to meetings. And then when I was in a role in a national workforce development organization, we all staff learned facilitation skills to deliver program to young adult learners, and that really kind of influenced the meeting culture in that organization and influenced kind of how I led meetings and kind of conceived of meetings. And as I started to do more and more work outside of that organization, I came to realize that that was kind of a unique way of thinking about things, and something that I've just kind of continued to go deeper on and evolve as I have kind of grown in my career.
And yeah, can you tell like an example of like a great meeting or a terrible meeting? Like what makes the difference? I mean, I can imagine. I have been in them, but like how would you define it?
I mean, I think most people are familiar with that kind of it could have been an email meme. And I think that anytime someone's kind of leaving with that feeling, like that's a sign of a meeting that could have been better. And when I think about that, I think about a few root causes there. I think that a lot of times we are moving a million miles a minute and sending a calendar invitation feels like a great next step and that it's done. But that's really not kind of all that it takes to run a good meeting. So kind of calendar autopilot. I think being in meetings where there isn't any room for structured engagement or kind of an intentional engagement, that's a recipe to kind of feel like the meeting wasn't great. And then times, I think it happens a lot in organizations where it could have been an email, but no one reads email. And so it couldn't have been an email. And so like you did need it to be a meeting, but there's just a disconnect there. So I think that those are some signs of like meetings that could have been better. And I think that by kind of following a structure, the kind of building blocks of a meeting for every meeting that you have, or kind of many important ones, you can kind of get around some of those challenges.
I love that. I want you to walk us through the building blocks, but I also like I have to ask, have you ever seen the like conference call in real life like video?
I've seen
Uh,
those. I've seen like conference call bingo. I've seen,
yeah.
yeah.
There's like real life that there was a period of time in which it was like one of the first ones that got made, maybe like 2012, 2013. And I literally used to just watch and laugh because it felt like my life. And it always ended with them being like, Beth, you'll summarize this and send it in an email that could have taken the place of the meeting. And she's like, yep, always do. It just always makes me giggle.
Yeah.
Yeah, talk us through the building blocks. And I want to hear especially around like the intentional engagement you mentioned, because that feels really beautiful and I don't know exactly what it means.
Yeah, totally. And like before I dive into that, I'll just say that like just because I kind of talk about all these things doesn't mean I haven't committed every single one of these errors myself. And this is definitely kind of a learning experience, and something we could all kind of aspire to do with more intention. So in terms of the building blocks, I think about kind of four for every meeting. There's the housekeeping, warm up, content, and close. So
Okay.
housekeeping is like, hello, why are we here? What are our norms for engaging today? You may not say those exact words, but kind of you're grounding people in kind of the norms. What, should they ask questions? What do you do when a topic comes off that's going to go off topic? Hey, did you see that email from HR? It's kind of all of those kind of housekeeping things. And going over kind of why are we here? Warm up. I recommend starting with a question that gets everybody talking. A lot of people are familiar with icebreakers. I think warm up much more expansively. So it could be like a strategic question that you want everyone to answer that relates to the meeting topic that you're having. So an example, you're talking about an upcoming change in your organization. You might ask everyone, hey, what is a change that happened at a previous job that went really well? What made it go well? Like that's one way to kind of tee people up for that conversation. Content is really kind of the meat or the heart of your meeting, where you're thinking about kind of what you want to achieve in that meeting. And then close. So how do you actually wrap it up so that it doesn't just stay in the meeting, but kind of action, you get to deliver on what you discussed. And I can go into more detail on both of those if you want, but I didn't want to. Yeah.
On all of those would be really helpful, because I also think, one of the things is, always just like time capacity and like, what am I putting in and how much? And some people are on autopilot, like as you said, right? And others are like stressed about meetings. Like I think we're all coming in such different places around them.
Yeah.
So yeah, like the more examples you can share and the deeper you can go, I think it's helpful.
Yeah, totally. So with content blocks, what I think about is that this is kind of in a standalone kind of ad hoc meeting. Maybe you're bringing people together for 30 minutes to talk about a particular thing. You only have one content block. And each content block will have an objective, will have probably some prep that you need to do as the person kind of bringing this topic to a meeting, even if it's just, what do I want to get out of this? Sometimes there's prep for attendees to do. Maybe there's a pre-read to do. Maybe there's a tracker they need to update beforehand. And then there's time for kind of structured engagement on the topic. This is where we talk about like facilitation techniques. It might be something like, I'm going to ask everybody to reflect on what I just presented silently for 2 minutes before inviting questions. That's a way to structure engagement that doesn't take a lot. It could be do that and then turn to the person next to you and talk about it and then share with the group. That's kind of a, think, pair, share. It could be even more structured in kind of using some of those great virtual tools or flip chart paper, things like that, small groups. Lots of ways to do it, but kind of thinking about how do we get people to actually engage with the content that we are discussing, even if that is just kind of being thoughtful instead of saying any questions, thinking carefully about like what is the actual input that you want people to bring to your meeting.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking a lot when I was rereading your article and the different pieces about like, what are the intentions of the meeting, right? And it seems like sometimes it's like just being clear on that, right? It's like, I want feedback about this, or I want to know what's missing from this list, or I just want to make sure people understand because no one's reading email. Yeah. And so when you hear that, like some of the things in my head that are going are like, I need everyone to think of 2 things that are not on this list. Please share them, right? And so instead of like any questions, it's like, I'm trying to add to the list, or do people understand? And it's, turn to each other and share what you understand. So make sure, it's clear, or like everyone write in the chat what you heard, right? Or just give me a rating of like 1 to 5, like I fully get it or I don't, like that kind of thing. Is that okay?
Exactly. And I think that also relates to, when you think about kind of bringing people together for a meeting, I think it's really important to set clear objectives, and that's kind of all encompassing umbrella over these building blocks. Or kind of if you're in a long meeting, there might be a different one for each content block that you have. But really getting clear, what is the outcome you're trying to achieve? Something like really specific, like what does it actually look like after 30 minutes? And is it realistic? So is it realistic in the time you have, with the relationships that people have, with the context those people need? That can help you begin to surface like where might some of the sticking points be that could derail your meeting, and help you prepare as a leader with kind of your own personal objectives for how you need to show up to be there.
I love that. Yeah, and let's talk wrap up, like, because I think that's often a place that things fall. Right? Like it's either a list of like, here are the 3 tasks that are done and who's doing, which is better than nothing. But yeah, how do you think about those? And what are some good examples?
Yeah, I think in an ideal world, you or kind of whoever is keeping time, it doesn't just have to be you as the person who called the meeting. You can delegate some of these tasks out. Yeah.
Should never be allowed to keep time.
Before wrapping up, I think it can be really helpful to first ground in like, hey, we came together to achieve this. This is what we talked about. Here's what's happening next. So to kind of really reground people in kind of why you were there and what progress you made. Cover kind of what happens next. That could be summarizing all the action items in the moment. I think ideal world, you have the time to do that. Or it could be saying, here is how we're going to get to that action item summary, and here's who's doing it. So I think sometimes you can lower the bar for yourself, and that can be helpful. And then the last component, I think, of an effective close in many situations is to ask a checkout question. So asking a question either about the meeting itself, or to kind of gauge how folks are feeling coming out of the meeting.
I love that. It's so interesting as you're talking, I just keep thinking about like what I learned in high school around like how to write, which is like you tell them what you're going to tell them, then you tell them, and then you tell them what you told them, right?
Yep.
And I have to like have some thinking about what am I trying to tell them? What am I trying to get? It's like more engaging. Um, but you had one of your most recent newsletters that I'm like really enjoying. It's like really fun. Was also like part of this is it's not that you're like sitting down every time being like, do I have all of this? It's more like here's the framework. And if you are using it, it then just becomes natural, right? And you're consistently like, oh, there's an objective. Oh, what's a good like I always open because people want to know where they are and why they're there. Some sort of strategic warm up, which I think is so good. Because I've always like I love the concept of check-in questions, but I think often they're like, they can just be a moment of fun and connection. But sometimes I'm like, you could use these. And I love, yeah. So it feels like that framework allows that freedom. Yeah.
Yeah, I think of it, I like thinking about it as kind of building blocks, a framework, a puzzle, and really thinking about kind of how can all these puzzle pieces fit together. And some days the checkout question might be a one-word answer, or you may say like this meeting actually it doesn't apply, but kind of always going through this kind of mental checklist about kind of how am I using and playing with these building blocks, I think can help you kind of stay creative and stay on track. And I think what I always encourage people to think about is how do you make this manageable? So if you try to apply this to every single meeting all at once on your calendar, that's like saying, tomorrow I'm going to start running, doing yoga and strength training, and I will do it 7 days a week, right? Some of this is about, okay, what are the highest impact meetings where you really want to put in the kind of time investment to think about this? Or how do you think about one component that you might want to shift and try and see what you can do differently, and try that in one meeting a week or one meeting a day, and kind of play with what is feeling good to you.
I love that. It's interesting. After we met, I started whenever I have meetings. So I like prep my day each day. Like I'm like, oh, what do I have? I just take a minute. And I've started writing like my objective for each meeting. And so not all the way there with all of the building blocks all the time. I'm also not always running the meeting. Sometimes I'm just going. But even when I'm just going, like having an objective for it, it changes my intentionality and like how I'm engaging in it. And so I will just express gratitude for you for that, because it's like, I've learned that my whole life. It's not like something new, but in our conversation, it was a moment of like, yes, this matters. And it does. It like really makes a difference.
I'm so glad to hear that. And that was absolutely a game changer for me in my own leadership and experience at work was, I think it can be so easy to feel like our calendar is happening to us. And we may be in a culture where like, I would encourage folks to like say no when they can, kind of shape the agenda when they can. And like sometimes that's just not possible. And so thinking clearly, okay, what can I control? Like, what do I want to get out of this? And there are a lot of things that you can get out of a meeting, even if you can't get out of the meeting. I didn't mean to do that, but I'm glad I did.
I have two more questions. One of which is, I think all this is really helpful if I'm like an individual attending or doing, but like if I'm an organization thinking how to do this better, right? Like if I think about previous orgs I ran and the amount of hours that people spent in meetings, and I remember I used to sometimes calculate how much money a meeting cost in the back of my head. I'd be like, wow, we have like 13 people here. This meeting is like a $40,000 meeting, and we are not like that is not doing what we need to be doing in this, right? How would you thinking about this as an organizational level?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think that it, like with so many things, like this can't just be top down or can't just be bottom up. I think it has to be kind of all of the above, and kind of helping folks build some of these skills, and then really getting kind of clear on norms. And so that's norms for individual meetings, but it's norms for meeting culture. And I think a helpful exercise can really be kind of with whatever subset of folks, maybe it's an executive team, maybe it's a kind of a leadership team, maybe it's kind of in a function, but like what are the current implicit and explicit norms that we have around meetings? Like what happens if you're late? What happens if you're early? What happens when people go off track? And kind of how are those serving our goals? How are those not serving our goals? Can be a really good place to start, and then start experimenting with like what norms might we want to introduce. I do think kind of having some training around what it means to write an agenda, design a conversation so that you actually can get the input needed for a decision, like those kinds of things, like that can be really helpful because we often, promote people and then expect them to be able to run a meeting, but like haven't taught them how to do that. And so that can be helpful kind of to do that, especially like across a group of people managers, as one example.
Yeah, I love
Yeah.
the idea. And it's like, yeah, how are we making space to talk about what it is? I can also imagine even just like setting the article and the resources and
Yeah.
being like, everyone think about this and come to our next like management meeting or whatever and think about what's one thing that you want to like bring forward, right?
Yeah.
Or what's one place you think we might need more training,
I
like
mean,
we're more either individually or collectively.
yeah, I mean, I think this is also a really good way to think about those building blocks too. It's like, how
Mm.
can you use a warm up question to strategically surface things that
So,
are working or not working, or a checkout question? Or like, how can you take like 15 minutes in your team meeting to help build this skill for your team? Like, there are ways to do it in the context of meetings you already have on your calendar rather than scheduling that separate training.
yeah. Oh, I love that. I love even the idea of like, yeah, like what's the best meeting that you've been in the last week? Why? Right? Like,
Yeah.
what's the worst meeting you've been in? Yeah, even just that. Oh, I love that. I guess final question, like, what do you think changes when an org has good meetings? You know, like, because I can think again about a specific meeting, but like if collectively an organization or a team is having good meetings, what shifts?
Oh, I think so many things shift. Clearly, I'm very excited about this. I think that like work moves forward because people are actually kind of using the meeting to do that. I
Mhm.
think there's a more kind of positive and maybe not even positive. There's a more kind of collaborative and effective culture where people kind of have the relationships they need and kind of trust that they need in order to move work forward, both in and outside of meetings. I think it can really be used, as I was just saying, for professional development. And so, kind of professional development can be a lot more part of the rhythm and not something extra that folks are doing. Um, so many things. I think it can save a lot of time too, because it's not just, the meeting wasn't run well, so then it runs over, and so then we have to schedule part two, which does happen, and sometimes that's good, and sometimes that's bad. Like sometimes conversations take more time, but I think what it really improves is it. There's fewer kind of, I think Brene Brown says, meetings before the meetings and meetings after the meeting. I think that sometimes when they're not kind of run well, people are kind of talking about that before and after. Yeah.
So helpful. Yeah, I think all of that is true. And I think for me also, it's just there's something about like, I don't think work has to be as hard as it sometimes feels,
Mm-hmm.
especially in the social sector. And I think meetings are a big part of that, right? Like in a lot of ways. And so I think to myself, like, if we could do this well, how much better could it feel? If you're spending 1 hour a day or 8 hours a day in meetings, if those felt productive and connected and engaged, I love when you said the intentional engagement, right? Like if that's how it felt, um, not only would we get more work done, but it's like, I don't know, to have a lot more joy and ease in it, which like, yes, please, right?
Yeah, they can be a lot of fun.
When you were like, I used to look forward to going to meetings, like what a beautiful thing. This is so fun, Jess. I like, and I also just want to note, like, I've loved your newsletter. It's been so fun. So I'm
Oh,
excited.
thank
Like,
you.
we'll have the article with all of the details and the toolkit, and yeah, I'm just grateful that someone's talking about it in a way that feels so accessible and so like clear and not an academic article about like these are the most effective or you must do this agenda, you have to follow these rules because well those things come from good places. I think the moment you don't hit some of them, they're really hard. And this feels really grounded in like I've done this for a long time. I've learned some of these different pieces that make sense. And then how can someone just make it their own, which I have deep respect for. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jess.
Yeah, thanks. This was great.